the other bit I want to talk about is the potential fight that could happen between GSP and Oscar De La Hoya. So I'd like to see this fight happen for two reasons. It'll be an interesting matchup between Oscar De La Hoya, who is someone who, surprisingly, up until recently, who I should have known who he is. I didn't know too much about him. He's a really successful boxer who has won a lot of fights, many fights. So of course he needs no introduction. Many people watching this podcast, if you're interested in mixed martial arts and combat sports like I am, you know who he is, of course. And of course it's GSP, who I know a lot more about. Honestly, I do know far more about him. So basically the point that I'm trying to make here is that the fight potentially that could happen between the boxing match that could potentially happen between them, it's been blocked by Dana White. And the reason why it's been blocked by Dana White is almost like someone who, no, I'm not gonna give that analogy, but it's been blocked by Dana White because, well, GSP's contract with the UFC hasn't fully or officially expired yet. Even though he has retired, he's recently turned 40 years old, but he doesn't compete in the UFC. He doesn't compete in mixed martial arts anymore. But his contract, as far as I can tell, judging by this situation, is still live. So I think Dana White's blocking this fight because more than likely, I think he believes that GSP will lose and that Oscar De La Hoya will win. I mean, look at what happened between Jake Paul and Ben Askren. Jake Paul, I hate saying that name. I just hate saying that name. I don't think there's any difference between the words, the meaning of the word clown and the word Jake Paul, or the name Jake Paul. So Dana White is concerned that if if George St Pierre loses this fight between himself and Oscar De La Hoya, then it will dent GSP's legacy in mixed martial arts, and also it will hurt the legacy of the UFC because GSP is considered to be one of the greatest mixed martial arts fighters of all time, and yeah, he is. So they're concerned that if that does happen, then the UFC lose a lot of money. Then clearly they don't have one of the best fighters in the world of mixed martial arts anyway, on the planet. They do not have one of the best. They don't host one of the best fights, or they don't host the best fighting events. They don't host the most entertaining fighting event. And to be honest, they don't. The UFC, at least for now, they don't host. I don't agree that they host the best. Or I don't agree that they host the most entertaining fighting events at the moment. Quite a few of their fight cards have been dull. Even the main cards have been dull. For me, personally speaking, for myself, a lot of the most wow factor fights that I've seen recently have been coming from outside of the UFC. Bellator, One Championship, PFL. I just recently saw that fight between, is it Ferreira and is it Werdum at PFL? PFL, is it 3 or so? I can't remember. It was just about 4 nights ago. It was a crazy fight. How they started, how they finished. It was just fucking mad. So when I see those things, it's testament that the UFC do not have the best fighters, and they do not necessarily host. They do not necessarily have the best fighters, and they do not necessarily host the best fighting events. They don't. And every time I see that outside of the UFC, I'm always reminded of that, which is a fact, because there's no way that they can host the best human beings, the best fighters, basically, the best fighting events. And on top of that, of course, they're notorious for how badly they pay their fighters. For an organization that has the biggest monopoly, the biggest share of the mixed martial arts market when it comes to pay-per-views and the buying of tickets and how big the events are when they host them. So I was saying so much. So it's understandable why Dana White would not want this fight to happen, but GSP seems to want this fight to happen. Oscar De La Hoya has made no secret that he wants this fight to happen. He wants this fight to happen just as much as GSP does. He probably wants it more to happen. He probably wants this fight to happen more than any. As for the three of them, he wants the fight to happen the most. And Dana White is thinking strictly from a business standpoint of view. He doesn't care too much about GSP's legacy as such. He more or less is concerned about the company's legacy, which is understandable. He's a businessman. When it comes to business, a business exists to make a profit. So you're a business first before anything else. So that's understandable. Me personally, I would love to see that fight. Be an interesting fight. And if if George St Pierre loses the fight, I've got nothing against George St Pierre. I love him. He's a great guy. Great personality. Very humble guy. And he's done so well in mixed martial arts. He really has. Oscar De La Hoya is another guy who's also quite likable as well. I have no problem with him. There's nothing about him that I don't like. If George St Pierre loses this fight, and again, I have nothing against him, but if he loses this fight, yes, it will change things a lot for the UFC, and I can see why Dana White is so desperate almost that this fight doesn't happen. Even though, I say desperate, but the fight can't happen because more or less on paper he owns George St Pierre, so the fight won't really happen. But even now, I think the boxing promoter Triller, they're harassing more or less, and they're hounding Dana White. They're blowing up his phone, begging him to let the fight happen, to give George St Pierre permission to participate in this fight, because again, the fight could go the other way. Oscar De La Hoya could lose, and so the UFC would keep their legacy, GSP would keep his legacy as well. There's also that possibility as well. So I think another point to make is that George St Pierre, his wrestling is great, but I think his stand-up is no match for the boxing and striking capability that Oscar De La Hoya possesses. So that's also something that's I'm sure that Dana White and Oscar De La Hoya don't like each other. That's nothing uncommon. It's a known fact. They've had issues before in the past, and it's basically, I'm sure it's also one of the reasons why Dana White is not allowing this fight to happen. He wants to feel that he has that power over Oscar De La Hoya as some sort of revenge. But if it happened, I'll be glad for it to happen. And if Oscar De La Hoya wins, great. It would make some big changes in the world of mixed martial arts, especially for a company like the UFC. They'll be knocked off that top pedestal of being the #1 fighting organization in the mixed martial arts world, and see some big changes coming. But again, the fight could go the other way. GSP could win, and so that's also another possibility.